He promised to keep my pregnancy a secret, then told everyone. Now he's furious his dad did the same thing to him and I can't stop laughing. I found out I was pregnant with our second child 3 days before Christmas. It was a huge surprise, and when I told my husband the next day, he was over the moon. Me? I had a lot of feelings. Excitement, sure, but also nerves, anxiety, and the weight of everything that comes with growing our family. Naturally, I asked him to keep it between us for a while. I just wanted to process it, let it settle in before dealing with the onslaught of questions and attention from family and friends. His response? I'm so excited. Can I just tell work friend? I sighed, repeated that I'd really prefer we keep it private, at least through the holidays. Fast forward 10 whole minutes, and he casually drops, work friend is super happy for us. Oh, and I told other friend too. She says congratulations. I just stared at him, feeling that familiar heat of frustration rise. I let him know, calmly, that I was disappointed. That it felt pretty disrespectful. But hey, what's done is done, right? He promised he wouldn't tell anyone else. Spoiler alert, he did. Christmas rolled around, and every time we were with his family, I could feel him practically vibrating with the need to spill. I kept asking him to wait. To let me have this moment on my own terms. But nope. We had his parents over for coffee one night, and, surprise, surprise, he accidentally let it slip. You'd think he just couldn't help himself, like he was physically incapable of keeping a secret. He brushed it off with his usual excuse, I'm just so excited. Cue the next few weeks of him accidentally sharing with friends, aunts, cousins, anyone within earshot. But here's the kicker. For some reason, he hadn't yet told his paternal grandparents. And suddenly, his dad was on his case about it. Like, really on his case. Today, his dad hits him with an ultimatum. If you don't tell them by the end of the day, I will. And let me tell you, my husband came home fuming. He ranted and raved about how inconsiderate it was, how it wasn't his dad's news to share, and how dare he overstep like that. I listened, really listened, nodded along. And then, maybe, just maybe, I let the tiniest, pettiest thought slip out. I love you. But does this maybe give you some context for how it felt when you did the same thing to me? Boom. Wrong move. He absolutely lost it. Suddenly, it wasn't the same thing at all. I was being selfish, making everything about me, and playing the victim. What he needed, apparently, was support, not whatever this is. At that point, I snapped. I told him exactly how I felt, that his hypocrisy was glaring, and that I wasn't about to sit there and pretend this wasn't the same situation. We ended up in a huge argument, and now? We're barely speaking. And now I'm sitting here wondering, am I the bad guy? Was I being too petty? Should I have just hugged him, let him vent, and helped him calm down? Would he have realized his mistake on his own? Or was I justified in pointing out the irony of it all? Honestly, I don't think so. I'm still livid. But what do you think, outside observer? Is it really that different? Or did my husband finally get a taste of his own medicine and just not like how it felt? Update 1. A few weeks after the whole ordeal of him spilling the news without my consent, I was finally feeling a bit better about it. Or at least, I thought I was until my husband started acting weird. It started small, like him getting defensive whenever someone brought up the pregnancy or asking me if I was still mad about it. I wasn't bringing it up, but he sure was. Then his dad started pressuring him to tell his grandparents, and that's when things really got interesting. He kept putting it off, saying he wanted to do it in person or at the right time, but his dad wasn't having it. One day, his dad straight up told him, either you tell them today, or I will. My husband came home fuming, pacing around the house, ranting about how inconsiderate his dad was and how it wasn't his news to share. I just sat there, nodding, biting my tongue. I wanted to say something, but I waited, let him dig his hole a little deeper. Finally, I couldn't help it anymore and said, I love you, but does this maybe give you some context for how it felt when you did the same thing to me? You'd think I told him the worst thing imaginable. He got so defensive, telling me it was completely different and I was making it all about myself. According to him, I should have just been there to support him, not throw things in his face. Oh, the irony. I tried pointing out that it was the same situation, but he wasn't having it. The tension hung over us for the rest of the night. He barely spoke to me, and I didn't really feel like speaking to him either. I kept replaying everything in my head, trying to figure out if I had been in the wrong for pointing it out. I don't think I was, but the way he reacted made me question myself. The next morning, he finally called his grandparents. I could hear him from the other room, and it was going well at first. Lots of "oh yeah, we're really excited and we just wanted to make sure we told you ourselves." Then he got quiet. A long pause. And I knew. His dad had already told them. When he came out of the room, his face was tight, and he looked like he wanted to break something. He dropped onto the couch and mumbled, "Dad told them." I swear, it took everything in me not to burst out laughing. He went on and on about how he couldn't believe his dad would do this, how it wasn't fair, how he should have been the one to tell them first. I just looked at him and said, "Wow, I totally get how frustrating that must be." He knew exactly what I was doing, and he did not like it. Later that week, we went to his parents' house for dinner, and the moment we walked in, his dad, completely oblivious, goes, "I couldn't wait any longer. I had to tell them." My husband shot me this look like, "See what I deal with?" I just smiled and went back to eating my salad. But it didn't end there. My husband spent the whole night in a sulky mood, barely engaging, and I could tell he was stewing over it. When we got home, he brought it up again, saying he felt like the moment was taken away from him. And honestly, I should have left it alone, but I couldn't help myself. I reminded him, once again, how that's exactly how I felt. He got all defensive again, saying it's different because his dad did it, and he wasn't trying to hurt me when he told people about our pregnancy. I asked him if he thought his dad was trying to hurt him. He didn't have an answer. The irony was apparently lost on him, but at this point, I didn't have the energy to argue anymore. He finally admitted that maybe he was a little eager when he told people, but he still didn't see it as the same thing. I just nodded and let it go. Then, the next day, his mom calls me and says, "Oh honey, everyone at my book club knows, and they're so happy for you." I could practically hear my husband's soul leaving his body when I told him. At this point, it was honestly just funny. Every person he wanted to tell himself had already heard it from someone else, and the frustration was written all over his face. He kept complaining about how no one could keep a secret in this family. I reminded him, again, that I had wanted to keep it private for a little while. He just muttered something about how he was too excited and walked away. The real kicker was when his cousin, who he rarely talks to, sent him a congratulations text out of nowhere. My husband was completely baffled and asked how he knew. Apparently, his mom had told her sister, who told her daughter, who then told their whole extended family. Watching him try to figure out the chain of people who knew before he got to tell them was honestly kind of satisfying. Eventually, he just gave up. He stopped talking about it and accepted that the news was out. He did apologize, kind of. It was one of those "I'm sorry, but I was just really excited" apologies, which, you know, is not really an apology at all. But at least he acknowledged it. I didn't push him any further. But the best part? The same dad who pressured him to tell the grandparents? Yeah, he started sharing way more details than we were comfortable with. I found out through a friend that he was telling people the due date, my symptoms, even our short list of baby names. When I told my husband, he looked like he wanted to punch a wall. He stormed out of the room, muttering about how his dad had no right to share such personal details. I sat there thinking, welcome to my world, buddy. Honestly, I could have rubbed it in more, but I didn't. Watching him realize what it feels like to have something so personal shared without permission was enough for me. Eventually, I told him he needed to set some boundaries with his dad. He agreed, but I could tell it was killing him to admit it. A few days later, his dad called to ask how I was feeling, and my husband very politely told him that we'd prefer to keep some things private. His dad brushed it off, saying, "Oh, I'm just excited to share the joy." I just watched from across the room, silently cheering. My husband was getting a taste of his own medicine, and it was glorious. He still hasn't fully admitted how wrong he was, but I think he gets it now, at least a little. And if he doesn't? Well, he's in for a long 9 months of learning. Update 2. So after my husband finally got a taste of his own medicine with his dad spilling our pregnancy news all over town, I thought things would settle down. I was wrong. Because apparently, the universe wasn't done teaching him lessons yet. It started with his work friends. You know, the same ones he had to tell right away? Well, turns out, they're not great at keeping secrets either. He came home one day looking completely exhausted, dropped his bag on the floor, and said, "Guess what? My boss congratulated me today." I blinked. How did he find out? Cue my husband rubbing his face in frustration and mumbling something about how work friend might have mentioned it in passing during a meeting. I didn't even bother saying anything at this point. I just raised an eyebrow and let him sit with it. He got the message loud and clear. Then came the social media slip-up. My sister-in-law, bless her heart, posted a picture from a family gathering with the caption, "So excited for the new baby in the family." She didn't tag us or anything, but it didn't matter. Within minutes, I was getting texts from friends and coworkers, people I hadn't even planned on telling yet. When I showed my husband the post, he looked like he was about to explode. "Why would she post that?" he huffed. I shrugged. "I don't know, maybe she was just really excited." He got quiet. Really quiet. And that's when I knew he finally understood how I felt when he blabbed to everyone the second he found out. Progress? Maybe. But it didn't stop there. His mom called me a few days later, and right off the bat, she's going on and on about how she's been helping by telling people I haven't even thought about. I told Aunt Carol because she's been asking about you, and of course, I mentioned it to our old neighbors because they always loved you too. At that point, I just sighed. That's great. Later, I told my husband, and his reaction was priceless. He actually groaned and said, "Why can't people just wait for us to tell them?" And that was it. That was the moment I knew he really got it. But then, of course, his dad struck again. This time, it was at church. My husband was planning to tell a few people quietly when he was ready, but nope, his dad decided to make an announcement during coffee hour. Literally stood up and told the entire congregation, "We're going to be grandparents again." I heard about it through a friend before my husband even got home. When he walked through the door, I didn't even have to ask. He just threw his hands in the air and said, "I give up." I couldn't help but laugh. I mean, it was so ironic at this point that it felt like karma in its purest form. He tried to defend himself, saying that at least he didn't tell strangers when he spilled the news, but I reminded him that telling his friends without my consent was basically the same thing. He didn't argue. Small victories. Eventually, we decided to just embrace it. The news was out, it was everywhere, and there was no getting it back. I reminded him that this was exactly why I wanted to wait, to control the narrative a little, to take our time, and to process everything without a flood of questions. He nodded and, to his credit, apologized again. This time, it actually felt sincere. But then, in true husband fashion, he followed it up with, "But you have to admit, it's kind of nice that people are so excited." I had to resist the urge to strangle him. Fast forward a few more weeks, and now we're dealing with the other side of oversharing, advice. Oh. My. God. The advice. Since everyone and their grandma knows, now everyone and their grandma has an opinion. His mom has sent me 3 different lists of must-have baby items, half of which we don't even need. His sister keeps telling me how I have to go with cloth diapers because it is so much better for the environment, and random acquaintances have started DMing me with tips about pregnancy cravings and weird old wives' tales. And guess who's feeling super overwhelmed by it all? Yep. My husband. I caught him scrolling through his texts one night, sighing heavily. "People keep sending me stuff," he mumbled. "I don't even know what half of this means." I smirked. "Welcome to my world." He actually laughed, which I wasn't expecting. Okay, I get it," he said. "Maybe we should have waited longer." Victory. Finally. The silver lining in all of this? His experience dealing with everyone else sharing our news has made him way more understanding of my side of things. He's been more patient, more supportive, and, most importantly, he hasn't told anyone else anything without checking with me first. Progress, right? We're finally starting to move past the whole thing, but every once in a while, when he gets another unexpected congratulations from a random person, I can't help but smile a little. He made this mess, and now he's the one drowning in it. And honestly, I'm enjoying it a little too much. Update 3, so here we are. Months later, and honestly, I thought this whole drama would be behind us by now. But of course, life had other plans. At some point, I stopped being surprised whenever I'd get random congratulations texts from people I hadn't spoken to in years. I mean, at this point, I wouldn't be shocked if our grocery store cashier knew. My husband, though, he's still struggling with the fallout of his oversharing spree. The real kicker came when one of his coworkers, who we barely even know, showed up at a mutual friend's barbecue and immediately launched into, "So when are you due?" My husband froze like a deer in headlights, and I could see the regret all over his face. I just smiled and said, "Oh, not for a while." On the way home, he finally admitted, "I think I told too many people too soon." Gee, you think? But the fun didn't stop there. His mom has fully taken over sharing responsibilities now, which means I've started getting unsolicited advice from people I didn't even realize she talked to. Last week, one of her old coworkers, who I've never even met, messaged me on Facebook with tips on how to stay fit during pregnancy. Thanks, Karen. Real helpful. When I mentioned it to my husband, he groaned and said, "I'm gonna talk to my mom." And I couldn't help but laugh, because good luck with that. To be fair, he actually tried. I overheard the conversation, and it went something like this. Mom, could you maybe not tell everyone everything about the baby? His mom, "Oh, honey, people are just excited. It's not a big deal." Yeah, but it's not your news to share. Well, you told people, so I thought it was fine. I nearly choked on my tea when he walked into the room looking completely defeated. "I don't think she's gonna stop," he muttered. "Welcome to my life, buddy." But here's where it gets even better. My husband, in his infinite wisdom, thought it would be a good idea to make a group chat with both sides of the family to streamline updates so we could control the narrative. In theory, great idea. In practice? Absolute disaster. His mom and sister immediately started spamming it with baby name suggestions, nursery theme ideas, and horror stories from their own pregnancies. My side of the family mostly just reacted with thumbs up emojis and whatever works for you comments. By the end of the day, my husband had muted the chat and looked like he was considering deleting it entirely. I didn't say, "I told you so," but I definitely thought it. At this point, he's finally started understanding why I wanted to keep things quiet for a while. I think it hit him hardest when his dad casually mentioned to his coworkers that we were considering a specific baby name, one that I really didn't want anyone knowing yet. My husband came home looking exhausted and just said, "It's too late, isn't it?" Yeah, it is. Despite all this, I will say that things have improved. He's become way more considerate about what he shares now. He checks with me before telling anyone anything new, and he's finally realized that excitement doesn't give you a free pass to ignore boundaries. Progress. And honestly, I feel better too. I've let go of some of my initial frustration, and I'm trying to focus on the good stuff, like the fact that our baby is healthy and that, despite all the chaos, my husband really is excited to be a dad again. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that sometimes people need to experience things firsthand to really understand. I could have talked until I was blue in the face, but until he felt the sting of having something special shared without his control, it didn't click. And now that it has, he's been eating humble pie for months. Final takeaway? Boundaries exist for a reason, and no amount of excitement is worth steamrolling someone else's feelings. I just hope he remembers that lesson before baby number 3. Because I will make him suffer if we go through this again.